Is it all right if I go to the park real quick with her? Third part?
Be very, very careful about children. Don't use your hands. Don't get distracted playing with somebody's playing. Forget it. Don't throw out any equipment. No one has to. Oh, hi. Let's see. Okay, how come I can't hear you? Okay.
Can y'all see me and hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is that the first time you've heard me?
Yes.
Okay. I've been talking away. I thought you could hear me. Okay. So we've got Vicky and we've got Brentley. And who else do we have? I see another phone number up there, but I don't know who that is. Who's got the 964-7965 number?
Sorry.
Who's that?
Dallas Clark. I was on the phone with my grandma.
Oh, okay. Hey, welcome.
Thank you.
So we've got Dallas and we've got Brentley and we've got Vicky. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Have y'all got any questions so far on the first few chapters that we've done?
No, not really. I texted you about mine.
Yeah. Vicky or Brentley, any questions?
I don't have any questions, but maybe some suggestions because I didn't do so well on the quiz.
You didn't. Okay.
I did, and I've took my own notes. Went and watched the videos that you posted.
Yeah.
And took notes over that, and I was kind of looking at them as I was taking my quiz, but nothing was helping.
Oh, really? Did you?
Are the tests open book?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. The index for this book is awesome.
The index is awesome?
Yes.
Is that what you said? Who said that?
For the questions, keywords in the questions, look them up in the index. I found every question word for word except for one,
Okay.
just using the index.
Was that Dallas that said that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Now, who else is, somebody else has signed on. Who else is that? Oh, Farron. Hi, Farron.
I just signed.
Okay, and we've got Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea. Hey, Chelsea. Okay, do we have anybody else I haven't recognized yet? So we've got Dallas and Vicky and Brentley and Farron and Chelsea. Anybody else? Okay. If anybody else pops on, y'all let me know. Okay, any questions about, that's a good suggestion, Dallas, about the test, the test and the textbook. The test questions are from the textbook, and basically the course is based on the textbook. The PowerPoints come from, and the lectures come straight from the textbook. I use the textbook as an outline for the course, and for each one of the PowerPoints, I go basically through the textbook chapters, and I use that as my outline, and then I add a few things of my own. But the textbook is the guide for the course, and so if you read the book and then use that as your framework for your studying, and then go back through that, every answer for the quizzes is embedded in the chapter, basically word for word, if you want to find it. So that's the thing that you can do is go back and find every answer there. You've got I think 2 hours for each test and only 25 questions. So there should be plenty of time to peruse those things, and everybody should make a decent grade on the test. The test should not stand between you and a good grade in the course. In this particular class, everybody, I think, should be able to make an A. If you do all of your assignments, if you respond to every reflection topic, use your textbook, read your chapters, and then do every assignment. Use your textbook with your quizzes, and then the two major assignments are the resources, the web resources assignment, and then the instructional materials project toward the end of the semester, and then of course your field experience. If you just do the things that are required of the course, it's hard not to make a good grade, in my opinion, in the course. It's just one of those things. If you just do every assignment, and I don't think any of the assignments are super tough, if you just do them, then you're in pretty good shape. So if you're having,
Dr. Kevin,
yeah,
I actually have one question.
sure.
I never saw any discussion boards posted for the first 3 chapters.
You never saw any what?
Any discussion boards?
I didn't have discussion boards for the first 3 chapters.
Okay, I was just making sure I didn't somehow miss them entirely.
No, you didn't. I'm not too into the whole discussion board thing. I may do that some, but it's not a primary feature that I rely on a whole lot. Sometimes
Okay.
I think, I know some professors have you just do a discussion on every single thing, and sometimes I think that's, my opinion is that's just kind of shared ignorance. We just all give our opinion on something, and we just, sometimes I just think sharing opinions is redundant, and just signing on to say, oh, good job on that is kind of a waste of time. I'm not into wasting time a whole lot on assignments. I like to kind of cut to the chase and do what's important and not give a lot of busy work.
All right.
So that's one of the hallmarks of my classes, is not a lot of fluff. Let's get it done. Let's read our chapters. Let's learn the content, and let's test and see if we've done it, and then do something that's meaningful. Not to say that other professors who discuss to death every topic are doing it wrong. It's just not my thing. So we may have some discussions, but I'm not going to just beat you to death with discussion boards. Okay.
Okay.
Hope that's okay with you. Now, if y'all
That's
want to just
perfect.
discuss, we can do it. I'm not going to read all of it. But I think y'all are probably pretty busy too in the summer, and that's not maybe the best use of your time. Okay, let's talk about these upcoming chapters. We've kind of laid the groundwork for the framework for special education. And was that a dog? Oh,
Yeah.
puppy here. Brentley's got her puppy. The beginning of this, the next few chapters are the individual disabilities, which are where, to me, the fun stuff starts. And so what I'm going to do is open up the first PowerPoint to chapter 4, and we'll look at that. And so I'm going to get here on my screen, and we'll go over chapter 4. Now, chapter 4 looks at learning disabilities. Learning disabilities are the disability. I need to do the share screen thing just a second. So you can. Oh, you don't need to see my face while I do this. Well, I don't know. Maybe you do. Hang on. We'll share the screen. And there we go. Now. Okay. All right, here's that chapter 4 PowerPoint. The first thing that we want to talk about here a little bit is first the definition of learning disabilities, and you've got that in your chapter, so I'm not going to belabor that. The definition of a learning disability is kind of a convoluted definition. It goes on and on about the cognitive elements, the neurological aspects of a learning disability. You do need to know that learning disabilities are the most common of all the disabilities. About 52% of all the disabilities that we have in special education are learning disabilities. And some of you may have learning disabilities. A lot of people in college environments do have learning disabilities. It is the most common, and the most common learning disability is a reading disability. Now, dyslexia is a reading disability. Sometimes, though, people with dyslexia qualify as learning disabled, and sometimes they don't. It depends on the severity of their dyslexia. But dyslexia is a learning disability in reading. Just depending upon how severe it is, determines whether or not it rises to the level of special education. And we can talk about that a little bit more. But the causes of learning disability can be neurological. That means the way the brain is working. They can be genetic. That means, inheritable. So sometimes you'll see that learning disabilities are things that run in families. If a parent has a learning disability, oftentimes the children in the family will have a propensity for that as well. And we can have some environmental causes. The way children are, the surroundings, the way they're brought up, gives them more likelihood to have learning disabilities. There was an article in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram just this last weekend about the area around Las Vegas Trail. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that part of Fort Worth. It's over on the far west side of Fort Worth. And if any of you are from the Fort Worth campus of Tarleton, you just go out I-30 a little bit further, and you come to Las Vegas Trail. And there's an area there with a whole lot of apartments and governmental housing that has kind of become a kind of a ghetto of its own over the last number of years. And a lot of crime happens there, a lot of drug use, things like that. And this article that was in the paper was just one of the saddest things. It talked about some of the children who are the victims of that part of town, that neighborhood, and the schools that serve those children whose mothers and dads are often drug addicts. Mothers are prostitutes. They live in motels. They live in very low income apartments, and sometimes those children, because of the environments in which they're brought up, without a stable home, without good health care, without good nutrition, without good sleep habits, some of those kinds of things, environmentally, they're impacted, and learning disabilities can occur as a result of some of those kind of things. So when we break down learning disabilities, we've got 4 different types. We've got reading disabilities, math disabilities, writing disabilities, and then what we would consider oral language disabilities. So in the area of reading disabilities, we can look at those, we break those down into 3 different areas. We've got them in phonological awareness, the way we look at, the way we decode words. The second part, well, we've got phonological awareness, and several things wrap up into that. About 90% of the kids who have learning disabilities are kids with reading disabilities. Rapid automatic naming, if any of you are education majors, EC through 6 majors, then you're already learning about some of the characteristics of reading. So we've got the decoding part of reading, the phonics part of reading, the fluency part of reading is what we have there with rapid automatic naming, the rate at which a child reads. Word recognition would also be kind of part of the phonological awareness, the sight word recognition. And then we've got reading comprehension. And all of those roll into the types of learning disabilities we have in reading. About 25% of the children that have learning disabilities have them in math. And so we do have some crossover. We've got kids who have reading and math disabilities. Those problems can be in calculation, knowing your math facts. They can be in understanding math concepts, or they can be in more of your word problems. We can have disabilities in written expression, and it can come in a number of these types of areas. The way a child writes, the way they spell, the way they use their capitalization, punctuation, vocabulary, the way they organize their thoughts before they put them in writing, and the way that the quality of their writing when they start to put an essay or something like that together. When we talk about oral language, we've got 2 different types of learning disabilities. We've got expressive, the way a child talks, and then we've got receptive, the way the child interprets oral language receptively, the way they listen. So we've got speaking and listening types of learning disabilities as well. So the way we look at learning disabilities now, even though we break them down into those 4 kind of academic areas, a lot of it has to do with the way a child thinks, and that's what we call cognition. So the thinking part is what impacts the way a child performs academically. So the way a child thinks is what makes them have a learning disability in one of those academic areas. What about the way a child pays attention? Does that impact the way they learn in school? Well, absolutely. So a lot of kids who have attentional issues are impacted by that kind of thing. Memory issues. Kids who have poor memory are impacted in those academic areas. The strategies that they use for school. What we call metacognition. Metacognition, some of you that are in education classes already may know that term. Metacognition means thinking about thinking. The way you think about thinking. So planning the way you're going to approach a task. Thinking about the way you think is metacognition. And all of those kinds of things play into learning disabilities. Oftentimes kids who have learning disabilities are lacking in some of these thinking skills. And so therefore it impacts their academics. The way we identify kids with learning disabilities these days are twofold. Sometimes we use the response to intervention methodology. That is, we put a child in a track of looking at the way they respond to intensified instruction to help them when they're having difficulty learning. Another way is by giving them a standardized test and looking at their intelligence, and then looking at their deficits in academic areas. That's the more common method. Even though response to intervention, or RTI, is very, very common in our schools, we don't usually use it in Texas to identify disabilities. We usually use a standardized testing approach. Then when we look at instruction, ordinarily we need to modify the way we teach children who have learning disabilities, the way we approach the content, the way we, the procedures by which we instruct, and the environment. And your book talks about a lot of those kinds of things. The way we need to change things for children who have disabilities in particular academic areas. We need to make things more accessible to them. We need to teach more directly. Sometimes we need to just change the environment in which they're learning. We need to sometimes change their seat. Sometimes we can give them a peer tutor, and your book talks about a lot of those kind of things specifically. So that's the chapter on learning disabilities. Any questions or discussion you want to have about that? Y'all are quiet. Okay, the most common of all the disabilities, that's important, and that's a question that'll be on one of your subsequent tests, okay? Important to know. The second most common disability is speech impairment. Let's look then at chapter 5. I think chapter 5 is about cognitive impairments. Yeah, it is, intellectual disabilities. Okay, let's look at this one real quickly. Okay. The beginning of this chapter talks about the historical perspective of intellectual disabilities. And so you'll want to read that. I'm not going to go into a lot about that, about the way people have been identified and treated who have intellectual disabilities. Ordinarily, when we think about people who have what we used to call mental retardation, now we don't call it that anymore. We call it intellectual disabilities now. But what do you think of most often when you think about somebody with an intellectual disability? What's kind of the face of intellectual disabilities? Anybody think of somebody with Down syndrome?
Yeah.
That's usually what people think of. That's what the image that comes into your mind is somebody with Down syndrome. But there are a whole lot of people who have intellectual disabilities who don't have Down syndrome. And a lot of some people who have Down syndrome don't actually have an intellectual disability. Now that's kind of hard to believe, because that's what so many of us think is the face of intellectual disabilities. But the way we determine intellectual disabilities has everything to do with two factors. The first being IQ. That's the marker for intellectual disability, where a person's IQ is. Now, if I had a whiteboard here right now, I would make a bell curve on it. The bell curve, right in the middle of that bell curve is the IQ range with 100 right in the middle. And then about 15 points on either side of that is what we would call the average range of intelligence. And I always tell my classes that I can tell a whole lot about your IQs just by the fact that you're in this class. The fact that you're in a university setting tells me that your IQ is at least 100. You wouldn't have made it to a university setting without an IQ of at least 100. So I know that about all of you already. So you can rest assured that your IQ is at least 100, okay? Now, most of you probably have an IQ higher than that. If you're successful and you're already, everybody's probably at least you're at least a sophomore to be in this class, most likely a junior, maybe even a senior. Now, if you're at that point in your college career, your IQ is probably at least 105, maybe 110. If you're closer to your senior year, you may be 110 to 112. And we just know that by the fact that you've been successful enough in your college career to have made it to this level. People with lower IQs have already dropped out. They can't make it to this level in their college career. A smaller and smaller percentage makes it to that next level of success. Now, if you ever get a master's degree, you'll be in the next set of higher IQs. That's just the way it is. So the people who have intellectual disabilities are down at that other end, that other tail of the bell curve, with IQs of 70 or below. Now, if you're in the gifted range of intelligence, your IQ is up at the other high tail of the bell curve, with an IQ of 130 or above. So we've got that bell curve with those two tails. High end is 130 and above, gifted, very, very intelligent people. The very low end, the intellectual disabilities, what we used to call mental retardation, are IQs of 70 and below. Now, that's only 3% of the population are in those two tails. So only 3% of the population are up here at 130 or above, and only 3% of the population are down here in the low tail of 70 or below. Statistically, then, everybody else is in the middle. And then much more, 68% are in that average range between 85 and 115. That's where the vast majority of the population is. And then the tail gets smaller. A smaller amount of people are in that lower average range, and then that higher average range. And then that very small percentage of people are in those smallest ends of the two tails of the bell curve. So the people who have an intellectual disability, it doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter what their face looks like. It doesn't matter what their genetic makeup is, any of those kind of things. The way we measure it is with their intelligence, their IQ, and another factor that we call adaptive behavior. So even if a person has a very low IQ, they also have to have deficits in what we call adaptive behavior. And that is the way they behave in the world. Do they know how to make their way around the community? Do they know how to communicate with other people? Do they know how to do some daily living kinds of tasks for themselves? So it's possible that a person could have a low IQ, but be able to make their way around the world, have some street smarts, so to speak. And if they have that level of street smart and a low IQ, then they don't have what we would consider an intellectual disability. They don't have that combined set of two qualities, that intellectual disability and that adaptive behavior deficit. We also have to have a proof of onset in what we call the developmental period. That's anywhere up to age of 18. So we have to have those three things: low intellect, 70 or below, deficits in adaptive behavior, and age of onset during the developmental period, anywhere up to age 18. Now, we also break that down into several different levels of intellectual disability. A mild intellectual disability is an IQ of 55 to 70. A moderate disability, an intellectual disability, is 40 to 55. A severe disability in intelligence is, I believe it's, 30 to 45, something like that. And below that is what we would call profound. And those are people who probably are unable to walk, certainly are unable to talk, not able to feed themselves or to toilet themselves, things like that. Very, very significant disabilities in all types of getting around the world and managing life. So that's the kind of thing. In Texas, we have a little one extra little thing that we add to that definition. We allow for when we do our IQ test, we call this we allow for the standard error of measurement on the IQ test to be considered. So when we give an IQ test, let's say that the score is a 71 on a particular test. We allow for that test we allow to consider on that test the standard error of measurement. That's a statistical concept where any test has a little bit of error when we give it. And so when we give the test manual will tell us this test has about a 2 or 3 point, maybe a 5 point spread where we know that the true score lies somewhere within that range. And so when we give that test in Texas, we allow for that range to be considered. So if a student scored 71 on an IQ test and all of the rest of the evidence pointed to an intellectual disability, if the standard error of measurement on that test was 3 points, we could consider that student might have an IQ in the intellectually disabled range because their true score might actually be 70 or below. So that's what that means in Texas. The prevalence is discussed in your book. We do have, this is one of our more common disabilities, but we have some issues of overrepresentation. Interestingly, we tend to overrepresent students of color in this category, particularly African American boys. It's not well documented as to why, but we do have overrepresentation of African American males in this category, and it's across the country. It's not just in Texas, it's across the country. We also tend, historically, to have overrepresented children who are not native English speakers. Now think about that for a minute. Why would we overrepresent children who are not native English speakers? You think about giving them an IQ test and English isn't their native language. Well, not exactly fair to penalize somebody for not speaking English well, but we've actually done that in the US. We've given IQ tests and penalized children who were not native speakers and scored them more poorly on IQ tests because English wasn't their native language. Now that sounds pretty crazy as I say it, but it's happened. It's happened many times. And in fact, there are a few court cases that have been raised over that very issue. There have been some court cases also that have been raised over the issue of overrepresentation of African American males in this category. So you can read about those. Your textbook does address some of that, and you can read about those online as well. The causes in this category have some similarity to the causes of learning disabilities. There are genetic chromosomal issues, like the ones we talked about with learning disabilities. We've got certainly we've got Down syndrome. That's a chromosomal issue. There are many others that your book talks about. Environmental issues can cause intellectual disability, and then we have some psychosocial causes as well. Here's a whole list of the characteristics that go along with intellectual disabilities. And I'm not going to belabor those. We want to go ahead and get through some of this. But your book talks about all of these. The way we identify an intellectual disability is, first and foremost, we give an intelligence test. Then we test for those adaptive behavior skills that I talked about. We often interview parents and teachers to see how a child does in those adaptive areas. You know, do they are they able to care for themselves at home? Do they tie their shoes? Can they go to the bathroom by themselves? You know, can they pour themselves a glass of milk? Do they do they dress themselves? Do they take a bath by themselves? Can they brush their teeth? Can they cross the street by themselves? Some of those kind of things. Can they order a hamburger at McDonald's? All those things that are age appropriate. And then we also look at their academics and see how they're doing in school. The things that we want to teach children who have intellectual disabilities, it depends a lot on the severity, which one of those categories they would fall into: mild, moderate, severe, or profound. Many children with mild intellectual disability are able to deal with the basic academics that we have in school. Others need a more functional academic kind of a program where the academics that they're getting have a purpose, perhaps learning more about money, learning about the science that they'll see in the community, those kinds of things. Life skills that will be helpful to them when they get out of school. Learning how to advocate for themselves in the community. Community-based instruction, things that are going to lead toward a job someday, and then making the transition into adulthood. There are particular procedures that we want to use with students who have intellectual disabilities. Sequencing is very important. The way we present information, we want to give a lot of opportunity for practice. We want to redo particular skills again and again and again in order to affirm those in the mind of the student so that they then can generalize those to other situations. Sometimes practice is the thing that really helps to firm up a skill in the mind of a student who has an intellectual disability. Sometimes the environment in the classroom is what's really, really critical as well. Arranging the class so that it's appropriate for the student. Sometimes grouping is critical here. Assigning a student to a group of classmates that can assist, or to other students who have similar kinds of disabilities. There's lots of technology that we can use to assist students with intellectual disabilities. We do want to give opportunities in general education, but we want to make sure that they're appropriate. We want to make sure that the number of students in a particular general education class is right for the teacher and for the other students. We want to make sure that the type of students that are with the student with the disability are appropriate. And that's the end of chapter 5. Questions about kids with intellectual disabilities? Anybody? Okay. Chapter 6. This is kids with emotional and behavioral disorders. Now, here's the definition for emotional and behavioral disorders. This diagnosis is made by a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And here's the way it reads, straight out of the law. It's a condition exhibiting one or more of the following characteristics over a long period of time and to a marked degree that adversely affect a child's educational performance. And then the psychologist or psychiatrist has to make a determination about this. It can be an inability to learn, which cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors. An inability to build or maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships with peers and teachers. It can be an inappropriate types of behavior or feelings under normal circumstances. It can also be a general pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression. So depression is a quality here that falls under emotional behavior disorders. A tendency to develop physical symptoms or fears associated with personal or school problems. It can also be schizophrenia, but it does not apply to children who are socially maladjusted, unless it is determined that they also have an emotional disturbance. So what we're trying to rule out here is kids who just have bad behavior. It's not just naughty kids. It's kids who actually have an emotional issue. not just your naughty kids at school. We sometimes hear people call it emotional behavioral disorders. What we actually call it in special education under the law is emotional disturbance. That's the correct term under IDEA. In classrooms or daycare settings, other kinds of situations where you may find yourself in your future career, we kind of like to divide it into two distinct types of behaviors. We see children who we would consider to be disturbed, and they have internalizing behaviors. And then we see those kids who are disturbing, and they have externalizing behaviors. So the disturbed child is the one who sits in the corner and maybe puts his head on his desk a lot, or turns all of that anxiety inward. The disturbing child is the one who acts out, who kicks, who screams, who curses, who beats up on other kids, who gets sent to the office, who spends a lot of time in school suspension, the child who makes a very noticeable fuss of himself. That's the disturbing student, whereas the disturbed is often one who goes unnoticed, but the problems can be just as severe in a different kind of way. There are 6 types of behavior problems, and your book talks about each one of these. We've got a conduct disorder, socialized aggression, attention problems, anxiety, withdrawal, that's more the disturbed type, psychotic behavior, very noticeably the disturbing type, and motor tension excess. And your book talks about each one of these in quite a bit of detail. Your book also talks about the prevalence of these disabilities. Gender factors, we see these much more frequently in males than in females. It talks about the age factors, socioeconomic, we see these much more frequently in children of poverty than we do in children who are not. And we see them more frequently in children of color than we do of children who are not. At least that's the way we tend to identify them. We do have causes in all of these areas: environmental, genetic, and a combination of both. You'll see in your book a table of characteristics, so make sure that you take a look at that. Now, the way I said, the way we identify these, as I said a moment ago, is through a psychologist or psychiatrist. There's not a blood test you can give. There's not a particular IQ test or other kind of test that you can give for these particular types of disorder. The psychologist or psychiatrist does an observation. They complete some rating scales. Often they'll discuss things with the parent, the teacher. They do a personality inventory, a lot of questioning of the student, and that's how they come up with their diagnosis. This is one of the few categories where there's a lot of subjectivity on the part of the evaluator. Sometimes you'll have a psychologist who says, oh yeah, there's definitely an emotional disorder here. And then you'll have another psychiatrist or psychologist who says, no, I don't think so. I think this is more volitional. I think the child is intending this behavior, and it's not something that they can't control. I've worked with psychologists who, in one school district where 2 different psychologists had completely opposing opinions about one child. And that gets very, very frustrating for school personnel when the folks who are working with the child can't seem to agree on the diagnosis. So how do we instruct kids with these kinds of disorders? Well, they can be extremely challenging. We have to remember that they are students first. And sometimes we have to put academics to the side for a little while because the behavior or the emotion is what's overriding everything. So we begin with a behavior improvement plan or emotional kinds of focuses that we want to deal with first. Sometimes we have to do social skills training and teach the child how to deal with the world around them before we can get to anything of an academic nature. And your book talks quite a bit about some of these approaches. the way we would teach social skills would be to break down a particular task into its minute parts. For example, if you're trying to teach a child how to interact with a teacher, we would teach them look at the person, raise your hand, wait for acknowledgement, and then state your request. So we would break it down into those individual components and teach the child to do each one of those things discreetly. Once they had mastered those steps, then we'd go on to another social skill. Sometimes we find that children just simply do not know how to interact with adults or with one another. And we've got to start with the most basics and teach them how to do some of these very rudimentary things like having eye contact and raising their hand and those kind of things, step by step. We want to teach social skills directly. We want to practice. We want to teach them in context, and of course, always be consistent. So that's the chapter on emotional and behavioral disorders. Any questions, comments?
I really enjoyed this the chapter 6 because this is what I'm experiencing during my field experience.
Really?
I'm seeing a lot of the behavior plans and stuff. In the very beginning, on my first day, I was kind of just going in and not knowing what to expect.
Yeah.
And one of the students is having the behavioral issues, and I've experienced lots of things all at once in the first day, and it was definitely different, and it was a really good experience. It was like they had like I guess they have they had like 5 or 6 behaviorists come in,
yes,
and take care of that, and they have to like put them in a different room and then get that. But I think he had multiple personalities.
Wow. Those are some of this particular category presents some of the most difficult challenges. I had a classroom full of children with behavior disorders for a very short time when I was very early in my career. I was probably about 22 or 23 years old. And it was not my cup of tea. I couldn't do it. I had a classroom full of junior high boys out in Midland, Texas. And there were 10 of them and me. And it was more than I could do. But I think it's the toughest disability to deal with. Because you have such a variety. In that particular classroom, I had one little boy who had school phobia. So he was definitely the disturbed kind of child, very internalizing. He was afraid to come to school. And then I had 2 at this junior high who were already convicted felons. One who had attacked his pregnant teacher the year before and caused her to miscarry. He had kicked her in the stomach. So he already had a record for assault and battery. And then another one who, I can't remember what his crime was, but there were 2 that had convictions already. And then this one child who was fearful of school. And I thought, well, if you're not fearful of school yet, you're going to be before you're done with this group this year, because it was such a varied group. And then other kids with every other kind of imaginable emotional issue you could possibly think of everywhere across the spectrum. And so, you're talking about a child with a personality disorder. That's huge. And that's something most teachers are never going to see. And to try to have to teach, reading and math and spelling to a student who's not in touch with reality, that's an immense responsibility. Okay, let's take the last little bit here to look at chapter 7. This is speech disorders, I think. Yeah, communication disorders. Now, this one, I start by showing you 2 of my grandkids. That's Wesley and Wyatt. Aren't they cute? And the reason I show them is because Wesley has had a speech disorder. In fact, he's had a couple of speech disorders. Now, since I put this slide up, I've acquired another grandson through the adoption process. And he also has a speech disorder. So I'll tell you about Liam in a second. But here's the definition of speech disorders. Communication disorders such as stuttering. Now, Wesley is a stutterer. Impaired articulation. He has had impaired articulation, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. A language impairment. He has a language impairment, but Liam, my new grandson, has a severe language impairment or a voice impairment. So you have 4 different types of language disorders: stuttering or fluency, articulation, language, or voice. And all those have to adversely affect the child's educational performance. So there they are, the 4 types of communication disorders. So articulation is where a student has difficulty with the production of a letter or word. So when Wesley can't say his R's, so he says, let's see, I want to run around the playground. That's an articulation disorder, okay? I want to run around the playground. That's difficulty articulating a particular letter, okay? Now, a language disorder has to do with the way the child conceptualizes the words in the sentence. So when Wesley says, I randed fast today, he's not knowing which word to use. Now, he can say randed now, but he's not using it correctly. I randed. Now, a voice disorder is when the quality of the production of the voice is off. So a really high squeaky voice that's inappropriate, or a voice, you remember the character on The Little Rascals, the little voice that was froggy? A voice that's inappropriately low or scratchy, or abnormally high, or any kind of vocal abnormality. An always hoarse kind of voice, anything that's abnormal about the voice itself, the quality of the voice. And then fluency is another word for stuttering, or something like that, where the words will not flow. And this is the problem with our new little adopted grandson, Liam. He has just turned 4, and he came to us from the foster system. Our daughter and son-in-law have adopted Liam and his sister out of the foster care system. And Liam has been abused by a drug-addicted mother and I think a whole string of drug-addicted boyfriends. One of the worst things that happened to him that we know of is they would turn his crib upside down and keep him in a little cage, with the crib upside down, and no telling what all happened to him in that circumstance. But he cannot talk. He cannot talk. And so he'll try. They've done every kind of test with physicians to determine if he has a hearing problem or a problem with his mouth itself or any of the structure. And nothing is wrong physically with anything that should produce language. But they think it's not a cognitive issue, but it's an emotional issue that's standing in the way of his speaking. And so he'll start to try to talk, and he'll like that, and he can't get the words out. And it's one of the saddest things I've seen. But we think it's an emotional issue that's keeping him from being able to get the words out. He's in intensive speech therapy. He has a speech assistant device that helps him produce language with a little computer, and they're teaching him sign language. He has started saying a few words, and he wants to talk so badly. He'll tap on your arm and pull on your shirt and try to get your attention. I think early on, a few people thought he might be autistic. He's definitely not autistic. He wants to communicate. As we'll learn in chapter 11, children with autism shy away from communication, don't want to make eye contact, that kind of thing. Autism is definitely a communication disorder as well, but it's a lack of communication. And Liam definitely wants to communicate, but he does not have the fluency. So it can be stuttering. It can be any kind of disruption in fluency. So we've got articulation, an inability to articulate a particular sound or a word, language, the way we put the words together, voice, the quality of a production of the sound, and fluency, the rate of our production. So there's a section in your book that talks about all the different types of ologies here: phonology, the study of speech sounds; morphology, the use of those units of meaning; syntax is the grammar, structure; and then semantics is the meaning of words. It talks about the prevalence in your book, and then all of the different causes. It can be congenital, it can be an acquired speech disorder, it can be organic, it can be a functional. And your book describes all those in detail. So how do we identify these issues? And it can be done through standardized testing instruments. Our speech pathologists are the ones who help us with this identification process. Sometimes they use informal measures besides standardized testing instruments. They always want to gather a family history. And then they have to use their professional judgment. We also want to be very careful about identification of those who are linguistically diverse. Children who do not have English as their first language, we don't want to penalize them and call them language disabled when in fact they simply speak a different language and they're not proficient in English. There's an interesting section in your book that talks about an important event that has to do with Ebonics. This page, so who should be saying what and when? This website, I would encourage you to go to it about the talking child. A lot of people get confused about when children should produce particular sounds. So, when should a child not say the R poorly? When should the child stop saying, I thought I saw a putty tat, that kind of thing, like Elmer Fudd on the cartoons. Each one of those sounds should be produced at a certain rate, and we aren't concerned about sound production of particular sounds until a child gets to a certain age. And interestingly, boys develop all those sounds later than girls. And so we give boys a little bit of wiggle room on the production of those sounds. This website has a chart that tells you when to expect the production of each one of those sounds for boys and for girls. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in that, to take a look at that website. So how do we treat these kinds of things instructionally? Well, we want to model correct language for children. We want to go through some of these other procedures. We want to do some parallel talk with kids. We want to give them good role models. We want to give them opportunities to talk correctly, appropriately. It talks about the closed procedure, kind of a fill-in-the-blank model. We want to give them a language-rich environment, lots of opportunities to hear appropriate language, to mimic appropriate language. We can, when needed, give them technology that will supplement or even substitute, like we have with our little Liam, communication opportunities. And that's the end of that chapter. Okay, boy, we've gotten this right on time. It's 9 o'clock. What questions might you have about this chapter or any of the others or anything else in general? Anybody?
I have questions over the field experience.
Yes.
The reflections, there's no, I didn't see anything online or on Blackboard that's a format. So is reflection just basically what I went in there, what I did, and what I saw? Or
Yeah. Do I not have anything up there for you to use as a guide for that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I'll put something up. Okay.
Okay. And then also I went on the Tarleton website and just did my own field experience log.
Yeah.
I hope okay. Okay.
That's good. You're good. I'm
Okay.
not real uptight about that. Okay.
Okay.
I thought that we had one. Well,
She didn't.
you're good. Did somebody else
Okay.
say something?
Yeah, she didn't give us one.
She didn't?
Yeah, no.
Okay. Usually Ms. Schinnerer has one, but if she didn't, we're okay. All right.
Okay.
But I'll see if I can find one. But if you've already started using something else, don't worry about it. That's good. Okay.
Okay.
I don't want you to have to recreate something if I put another document up there. Don't feel like you have to start over. Okay.
Okay, that works.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions, concerns? These chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7, I think are due on Sunday night. And we'll have 2 or 3 days next week when you have an opportunity to take a test. Okay.
Okay.
What days do y'all like to take a test?
Oh, goodness.
Since you've signed on, you get to pick.
Okay, so
This last week we did it Friday through Sunday. Is that good? Or do you want to do it earlier in the week?
I think Friday through Sunday is perfect.
Yeah,
Y'all
I
like
think so
that?
too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I work during the week, so
What did you say?
Yeah.
I work during the week, so like the weekend is a good time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll do then next week. Those will be due on Sunday, and we'll make the test then the following Friday through Sunday. How's that?
That works.
Okay. And that'll be for chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7. And the format will be the same. It'll be 25 questions. They'll be completely related to the book. Since there are 4 chapters, and there'll be 5 or 6, 4, 5, 6 questions on each chapter. And it'll be the same format that you had this time. Okay. And if you've had a little trouble on this last test, don't worry about it. There's only 25 questions, 1 point apiece. That's not going to kill you. Okay.
Okay,
So
that works.
don't worry about it too much. Remember, I also give professional points and participation points. You're getting participation points right now for being on here. Okay. So
I had a question about like the web experience. I mean, the web sources.
yeah.
So I know we're supposed to just make a list, and I did. I'm sorry. I also put like a description of what each website, like explains. Is that mainly what you want, or?
Yeah. There's a sample online.
Okay.
Samples, because I don't want just a brief. I want a little bit of a review. So use that sample as kind of a guide to show you what's a good one. Okay.
Okay. And we're supposed to have each, after the field experience, we're supposed to have each of the reflections, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be huge, just a little bit, just to let me know, what you did that day. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else?
So is that like a page long, or like, I mean, is there like a specific
I don't know that there's a specific amount. This is the first last summer was the first summer that this has been required. And I'm just tell me what you did,
Do you like it double spaced?
I don't care.
Okay.
Just tell me what you did. I'm not real particular. I want to know what you did. If it, I don't think a whole page, that's Vicky that asked, right?
Yes.
I don't think it needs to be a whole page unless you did a whole ton of stuff. Just tell me a little bit, and you can be brief. Be brief. Okay. I don't want it to be another gigantic assignment.
Okay. That works for me.
All right. Anybody else? And if you have questions during the week, just shoot me an email or something, okay?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Y'all have a great week.
Me too.
You
And we'll do
too.
another one of these for the next chapter, so I'll have to look at the calendar and see when. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Good deal. We'll see ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.